Good afternoon, everyone. My clock says it's 4:30, which means we are ready to get underway with today's webinar, Conditional Formatting Bootcamp. Welcome to everybody, whether you're a new joiner or a regular. If you are a new joiner, probably some sad news for you, but as I mentioned last week to the people who attended the webinar last week, this is actually the last webinar we're going to be doing, which is very, very sad. Might be a shock to you, but something that's been coming for a little while. So the company that I run these for, because I'm actually a freelancer, they're focusing on a new project, so there's not as much money to go into these webinars, unfortunately. So today is the last one. It's really sad. I will give you some information at the end as to how you can sort of keep up to date with any updates. So it might not be the last one forever. I might decide to do these outside of the companies that I currently work for. So if you want to keep up to date with any updates, I'll give you information on how you can connect with me at the end of the session. But let's focus on what we're doing today. And we've got a nice little webinar, and we haven't run this one before. It's all about conditional formatting. So a really, really useful feature in Excel. And we've probably all used conditional formatting to some extent, maybe to do a few sort of very basic things. But I'm hoping in this session, I'm going to show you a few different ways that you can use it in ways that you just haven't seen before. And it's such a flexible utility, and you can combine it with lots of other things like different formulas to really make it powerful. So it's really going to help you with your data analysis. So we're going to go through some of those today. I'm by no means going to go through absolutely everything because this topic is huge. So that will give you something to research into a little bit after the session if you want to. Now, as always, I like to start with just a very brief introduction about myself. So my name's Deborah Ashby, and I am a freelance IT trainer and subject matter expert. And I do these webinars for Filtered Excel with Business and Skillsology. So if you're joining us from any of those sites, then welcome to everyone. I've been a trainer for quite a long time. This slide's actually wrong. I need to update this. It's just coming up to about 11 years in IT training now, and roughly sort of 24 years in the IT industry. And I've trained thousands and thousands of people all around the world, fortunately. Have got to travel quite a bit as part of my job, so that's quite nice. And my main focus is everything related to Microsoft. So mainly Excel at the moment, because that generally is what the most call is for. But I also do training in Word, PowerPoint, Outlook, Project, OneNote, all of those fun kinds of things. So that's me. I'm sure you're all familiar with me. We do have mostly regulars on these webinars. All right, let's jump straight into it. So we're talking about conditional formatting. And I guess the first question is, what is conditional formatting? As I said, in general, I don't like to assume that you know anything about a topic that I'm teaching. So we're just going to briefly look at what exactly is conditional formatting. Well, it's a tool within Excel that allows you to apply formats to a cell or a range of cells based on the value in that cell. Now, again, that's all well and good to say, but what does that actually mean? Well, this is just a very simple example, and this might be some sort of reason why you might want to use conditional formatting. So in this example here, you can see we just have some student IDs, some names, and then we have 4 different subjects that those students have taken exams in. And what I've done using conditional formatting is I've just highlighted all of the test scores that are over 60, okay? And this is a very simple piece of conditional formatting. And we're going to start with this type of thing, and then we're going to build on that and move up to some of the more complex tasks and also some things that you might not have seen before. But that's kind of the basis. It allows you to extract data and really kind of emphasize what it is that you're looking for, making things easy to see and making your data a lot easier to analyze. I can see I've got some things coming in on the chat panel. As I always say, it's quite hard for me to look. Let me just have a quick look to make sure we've got no questions coming in. No, it's just people asking for updates at the end of the video. No problem, I shall do that. All right, let's come out of here. And as always, I like to jump as soon as we can into some practical examples. So just bear with me. Right, so you should see up on the screen now, I have a workbook that has numerous worksheets at the bottom. And the first one we've got here is an album listing. So I thought this might be a bit more interesting to look at than some sales data. So we're moving into the realm of music. And what I've got here is, I think this is the top 100 albums or the best-selling 100 albums of all time. And we've got them divided down by year. We've got the album, we've got the artist, the genre of the music, the subgenre, and also the total sales. Now, I will point out straight away, these total sales aren't accurate. I'm pretty sure this one here probably sold more than 2 million copies, but just ignore the actual total sales. These are just figures that I've kind of put in there very quickly, but you get the general idea. This is what we're looking at. So let's start to use some conditional formatting to really kind of highlight some things in this spreadsheet. So we're going to start very basic. Now, if you've never used conditional formatting before, you'll find it on the home ribbon in the styles group. And you can see there, we've got a big old button in the middle there that says conditional formatting. And if I click the lower half, you'll see that we have lots of different options, and these all have menus that shoot off to the side. So as I hover over, you'll see we have a whole plethora of options that we can use in conditional formatting. And conditional formatting is actually rules. So if you've ever used rules before, then you've probably got a little bit of a head start when it comes to conditional formatting. And you can see we have options down here which also relate to rules. And we're going to be looking at sort of different parts of all of these in the session today. Now, you'll also see that the conditional formatting is kind of divided. If I move my mouse away, you can see we have a dividing line between the top two and then the next three. And these three down here, these were introduced, I think, back in Excel 2010, I think they came in. So if you have 2010, 2013, 2016, or 2019, you will have these options as well. And these are just ways of using conditional formatting to visually represent your data. And again, we're going to be using those as we go through the session so you can see how they work. We're all about making things visual and easy for people to understand. So let's start out with some of these ones. Now, you may have used these before. These are kind of the general ones which people who have played around with conditional formatting in general will know. So the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to focus on this year column, and I'm going to highlight the whole column just here. Now, say, for example, I want to highlight all of the albums which were released in 1965. Now, there are a couple of ways that I could do that. I could use a filter. That's a perfectly valid way of doing this. So if I was to use a filter, what I would do would be to go up to the data ribbon, click on this filter button, and it gives me my little drop-down arrows. I could then use this arrow and I could filter for 1965. And there we go. That very quickly gives me all of those albums. So you could use that, but what that does is when you use a filter, it does hide the rest of the rows, which sometimes in some scenarios is not particularly what you want. Maybe you just want to highlight them within data without actually hiding any of those rows. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear that filter. So again, up on the data ribbon in that sort and filter group, I have a clear button. So I'm going to clear that filter out. And I'm actually also going to turn off my filters because I don't need those. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use conditional formatting to highlight all of the albums which were released in 1965. And this is fairly straightforward. We're going to highlight our column. We're going to go to the home ribbon. We're going to click conditional formatting, and I'm going to go to highlight cells rules. And you can see there's lots of things in here. We have greater than, less than, between, equal to, so on and so forth. Now, it really depends what you're trying to extract. So if I was looking for maybe total sales, so all the albums which sold over 10 million copies, I might choose greater than 10 million. If I was looking for all albums which sold less than 5 million, I might use the less than. But in this case, we're looking for exactly a year. So I want to say I'm looking for exactly all the albums which were released in 1965. So I'm going to say equal to. And this brings up this little equal to box. And you can probably see here, it's very straightforward. I can just type in the year that I'm looking for, so 1965. And I can choose a color, and you have some basic ones in here. Light red fill with dark red text is the default, but I have some other ones. So let's say green, or you could choose your own custom format if you want a particular color, and click on OK. And if we look now, you can see that in this column, it's highlighted all of the albums which were released in 1965. Now, what I could do then is, if I wanted to then just bring all of those to the top, I could then combine that with a filter. So I could go back and I could turn my filter back on. So if I click on filter, and what you'll see here in the drop down is that you can filter by color. So Excel will recognize if you've got any background colors or font colors in that particular column. And you can see here it's showing me, okay, I have a cell color, this color, and a font color. So I'm going to say filter by cell color, and it will bring all of those to the top. It's pretty much the same as filtering on 1965, but you could choose to do that if you wanted to. So let's clear that filter like so. So that's a really nice, easy way of doing that. Now, once you do have conditional formatting applied, if I highlight this column again, if you want to manage that, so maybe you want to change the date, or maybe you want to remove it completely, you can manage all of your conditional formats, again, by going into the Home ribbon, clicking on the lower half of conditional formatting. And as I said, whenever you set up conditional formatting, it is essentially a rule. So you can go down to manage rules at the bottom, and it will show you your conditional formatting that you have applied to, in this case, the current selection. So what I could do then is I could then edit the rule, and I can make any changes to that rule. So if I wanted to change the color, I could. If I wanted to change the date, I could also do that in there as well. So you always have that editing option when it comes to your conditional formatting. So I'm going to click on cancel, and I'm actually going to delete this rule. So I'm going to click on delete and click on OK, and you'll see that that now disappears. I could similarly, if we just do another one, just so you get the idea, go to conditional formatting, highlight cells rules. I could say between. So if I was looking for albums that were between, let's say, 1975 and 1990, I could do that as well. So again, very simple to apply that conditional formatting. So really nice and straightforward. Let's move on and do something slightly different. Let's move on to the, let's do the artist column. So I'm going to click the artist column just here. Again, you can get conditional formatting to pull out text matches as well. So let's jump straight back up to conditional formatting, go down to highlight cell rules, and you can see we have there text that contains. So again, here I could choose a piece of text that I want to pull out. So let's go for the old classic, the Beatles. And this time I'm going to say I want to fill it with yellow, and click on OK. And you'll see it'll highlight everywhere it finds the word Beatles. Okay, so you can use text in there as well. Let's look at something else. This time we're moving to the total sales column. And again, in conditional formatting, we have, aside from highlight cells rules, we also have something called top bottom rules. So this will allow you to highlight the top 10 items, the top 10%, the bottom 10 items, so on and so forth. So if I just wanted Excel to analyze all the data in that column and just highlight what the top 10 values were, so essentially the highest amount of sales, I could say top 10 items. And this time we're going to highlight with a green fill. And I could adjust that. If I wanted the top 15, I could adjust that and click on OK. And if we scroll down, I should start to see some that are highlighted. So there we go. And again, you could apply filters if you wanted to bring those up to the top. So really, really nice and easy. Now, I'm going to assume that those are kind of the types of conditional formatting that you're probably reasonably familiar with. They're the ones which people tend to start off with, some basic highlighting, very straightforward to use. Now, you might have noticed that when I've been doing this, I've been highlighting the entire column. So I've been hovering my mouse over the top of the column until I get that little drop down arrow, click in once, and that will essentially highlight the entire column. It will go even further than the bottom of my data. If I scroll all the way down, you'll see it carries on past my data. Now, the reason why I do that is very simple, as opposed to just highlighting the data cells. It means that if I apply or if I add any other records to the bottom, it means that that conditional formatting will apply to anything that's put into that column. So I don't have to go back in and apply the conditional formatting to the new data entries, because that is what would happen if I'd only highlighted the data. Okay, that is why I highlight the entire column. So I would always encourage you to do that, because it just makes your life a lot easier if you're adding new entries into the bottom. Okay, so that's one reason why I do that. All right, so now we've got the basics down. Is everybody okay with that so far? Let me jump up to the chat panel, make sure you are all okay. Everybody all right? Yes? Wonderful. Not asleep yet? Okay. Wonderful, great. All right, let's move on to the next example. We're going to jump across to some test scores. This reminds me of being at school. It's a little bit scary. So what we have here are just, again, a very basic table. And I did briefly show the top part of this in my initial PowerPoint slide. So what we have here are some student IDs. We have some names. This is me and my colleagues, essentially. And then we have 4 subjects and our scores. So maybe we've all taken exams in these 4 subjects, and these are our scores. As you can see there, I'm not particularly good at maths or math if you're in the US. So what I want to do is I want to analyze this data a little bit using conditional formatting. So this is just another way that you can use it. Now, I might want to say that the pass mark, so in order to pass these exams, the pass mark is 65. So you can see there, I haven't done too well in a couple of these subjects, 49 for maths and 23 for English. So I'm going to fail. That's not great. But what I want to see is how many people have scores above this pass mark. So 65 or above, and they've passed. Okay, so I'm going to use conditional formatting in order to do that. So we're going to do this in a slightly different way. We're going to use a formula with our conditional formatting. So I'm going to highlight all of these scores, like so. I'm going to go to the home ribbon. I'm going to select conditional formatting. Now this time I'm going to go straight down to new rule. And what you'll see when you go into this new rule dialog box is that you have lots of other different options which you can use to apply conditional formatting. As I said at the beginning, the options are endless when it comes to what you can do with this. Now, what I'm going to do, and I use this option quite a lot, is use a formula to determine which cells to format. And I'm going to use a logical formula in here. What I basically want to say is if the score is greater than or equal to 65, then I want to apply some conditional formatting. Okay, so we're going to click in here and I'm going to say equals. Now, this is where I used to get confused with this. I'm going to say equals, and I'm going to select this first cell here, C7. So because I've highlighted the block, when I apply this, it's going to apply to everything I've got highlighted, but you just apply it to the one cell first of all. So I'm going to say C7. Now, I don't want this to be absolute. You can see here it's automatically put in these dollar signs, which means that the formula is locked to that particular cell. Now, I don't want it locked to that cell because we need this formula to apply downwards and also acrosswards. So I want it to be dynamic. I want it to be relative. So I'm just going to remove those dollar marks. It puts them in automatically for some reason, which is a bit of a pain. So I'm going to say C7 is greater than or equal to, and we want the pass mark 65. Now I could type in 65, but I want this to be dynamic because maybe this pass mark will change. Maybe next year the pass mark is 70. So I want all of my conditional formatting to update automatically. So I'm not going to hard code in the number 65 into the formula. I'm going to use the cell reference. So whatever's in this cell is going to be used in the formula. Now this time it has put in, it's made it absolute again, so that's why we have $B, $3, and I do want it to be absolute because I always want to reference that cell, okay? And I'm going to click on Format. So I now need to say, okay, when that's true, I want you to fill the cell, and I can choose any color in here. So let's choose, let's just do a nice light green color and click on OK. Click on OK again, and there you can see now it's highlighted everything in this little table that is 65 or above. So I can see very easily who's passed and who's failed. So as I said again, I'm not doing very well. I've passed 2 and I've failed 2 essentially. Let's do this again so you can see it in action. So this time I'm going to say, we're going to say there's going to be a retake mark. Oops, help if I could spell. Oh dear, what's going on? Retake mark. And I'm going to say you need to retake the test if you get between 45 and 65. So you get 45 up to the pass mark of 65, then you need to retake that test. So again, I want to see who in this table is going to have to retake the test. So we're going to do something very similar. We're going to go in again and we're going to highlight our entire table. We're going to go up to conditional formatting and we're going to select new rule. And again, we're going to do the same thing. So use a formula to determine which cells to format. Now I'm going to do this in a slightly different way. We're using a logical formula again. Now I can't use exactly the same formula as I used last time. If I did, what it's going to do is it's going to try and highlight everything from 45 upwards. So it's going to highlight everything that's 65 again, okay? So I don't want to do that because if I just put in here, highlight all cells that are equal to or greater than 45, it's going to highlight things that are above 65 as well, which I don't want to do because we've already got those highlighted. So essentially what I want to say in here, and I'm going to use a different logical formula, which you may or may not have come across, and that's the formula AND, open brackets. And what I'm going to say is I'm going to do pretty much the same formula that we did last time. I'm going to say and I'm going to select my first cell just here. And again, I'm going to remove the absolute referencing. I'm going to say if C7 is greater than or equal to C3, like so, and I'm going to keep that as absolute. And then I'm going to say and that's where the comma comes in because we're doing 2 different options here. C7, I'm going to delete out to, oops. This can sometimes go a little bit weird. So C7 is less than or equal to, I think I've got these round the wrong way. Let me start that again. Hang on one second. I think I want this one to be B4. That's right. And C7 is less than or equal to C2. So let's just take a look at that before I click OK. So what we're saying essentially here is if C7, so this cell just here, is greater than or equal to B4, so 45, and it's also less than or equal to B3. So that's going to give me everything that's between 45 and 65. And I'm going to click on Format, and I'm going to select a color, click on OK. Click on OK, and there we go. All right, so that's the way that you can use the logical functions in order to define those two different conditions. And it does take a little bit of practice, and especially if you're not used to logical functions like and or, but it is worth knowing that you can use formulas to apply your conditional formatting. And then of course, because we're linked to these cells, if these cells were to change, so if the pass mark was then to go to 75, you'll see that those change. And if I go to 85 again and hit enter, you'll see those values change. All right, so that's another way that you can use conditional formatting. Lovely. Let's jump across to the symbols worksheets. And this is something I learned very recently, and I just saw it and I thought, oh, that's actually kind of cool. I've never seen conditional formatting used in that way. And in this, again, we're going to use some formulas. We're going to use an if formula, and we're going to apply some symbols to our data. So let's just take a look at the data that we are currently using. So here we have some invoice numbers running down here. We have some clients, so company A, B, C, D, so on and so forth. We have a description, so this might be the kind of data that I might use. So this is a training invoice worksheet. So these are the different training things that I've done. The amount in dollars, and also whether that invoice has been paid. So you can see in here we have Y equals yes, it's been paid, pending means I'm waiting for payment, and cancel if that training's actually been cancelled. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some symbols in conjunction with conditional formatting to visually represent whether these invoices have been paid or not. And again, in Excel, it's very much going the way that we like to have everything represented in a very visual and interesting way. A lot of the time, using things like pictures and symbols and icons are a really nice way of just making things more interesting for people to look at. People in general are a lot more visual. They prefer to look at things like that as opposed to just lots and lots of text. So we're going to do something slightly different here. We're going to use some symbols to represent whether the invoice has been paid. So I'm going to have a symbol to represent yes, a symbol to represent pending, and a symbol to represent cancelled. So what I'm going to do first, I'm just going to go over here and sort out the three symbols that I'm going to use. So I'm going to go up to Insert, and all the way over on the right hand side in the symbols group, you see we have a symbols option. And again, this may or may not be something that you've come into previously. There's lots and lots of different symbols. Symbols are essentially a font, which is why you have font up here. And I'm going to use Wingdings 2, which gives us sort of all these fun little symbols that we could insert into our spreadsheet. And because I've been practicing this over the last couple of days, you can see in my recently used symbols at the bottom, I actually have the three symbols that I'm going to use. So every time an invoice has been paid, I want it to display a tick. So I'm going to use the tick symbol. Now there's something really important that you should note here. You'll see underneath, when I've got that symbol selected, I have a character code, which is code number 80. So I'm just going to remember that for the moment. I'm going to insert that symbol into this cell. And next to it, I'm just going to put the character code, which is 80. And you'll see why in a moment. But that's going to be for all my invoices that have been paid. I'm now going to choose a symbol for invoices that are currently pending. So I'm going to go back up to symbol, and I'm going to use this little clock icon. Character code is 141. And I'm just going to enter that in there. And finally, I want a symbol for any invoice that's been cancelled or any session that's essentially been cancelled. So again, symbol, and I'm going to use the little hand icon. And we're going to look at the character code, which is 78. And close. And we're going to put 78 in here. All right, so now we have those. You might be thinking, well, how are we going to use those, and what are these character codes for? Well, we can use these in a formula, because it's very hard to tell Excel that you want a symbol inserted as part of a formula. How would you do that? It's sort of like a graphic, really. Remember, they are fonts. So now that we have these symbols essentially with their numerical equivalents, we can then use them in a formula, and then we can apply some conditional formatting. So what I'm going to do in this column just here is we're going to start to build an if statement. So I'm going to make this a bit wider. And what I'm going to say, and again, if you've not used if statements before, we're going to do a little bit of a nested if statement. And I would encourage you to check out one of our webinars on if statements. We've run them fairly frequently over the last 3 years. One of the most useful and important functions in Excel for you to know. So you're going to get a little bit of a crash course in it just here. So we're going to type in equals, and we're going to say if, and we're going to open our bracket. Now you can see underneath it says, what's the logical test? So what I want to say is if E4 equals, and then I'm going to say Y, and if you're using text, you have to put it in quote marks. So if E4 equals Y, I'm going to put in a comma, and you'll see it says, okay, well, if that is true, what do you want me to do? So if that's true, I want you to return a tick. Now, I can't say tick in here, so I use the character code number, and I combine it with the char, which is the character function. So I want to say char, open bracket, 80. Okay, let's just review that. If E4 equals Y, then return 80, okay, which is the numerical equivalent of a tick. Now, that's not the only thing we want in there. We want the other ones as well. We have 2 more to add in. So I want to continue on with my if statement. And this is where we move into nested ifs. And what I mean by that is it's when you have an if statement within another if statement. So I'm going to say comma, and we're going to do our second if statement. So we're going to say if, open bracket. Logical test is pretty much the same. So we're going to say if E4 equals, and this time we're going to say if it equals pending, comma, we want to return the character 141. We want the little clock there, so 141. Close bracket. And I'm sure you can figure out what's coming next. The final one, the final if statement, comma, if, open bracket, our logical test, if E4 equals, we want the final one here, which is cancelled, comma, we want it to return the character 78, like so. Now we've got quite a lot in there, and remember, when you're building something like this, you need to close off as many parentheses as you've opened. I've got quite a few in here. Now, some of these are already closed. So the ones around char, you can see already have an open and a closed bracket, but these ones are all open. So I need to have 1, 2, 3, I think. So let's do another 3. 1, 2, 3. Now, the good thing about this is if I don't type enough closed brackets, Excel will prompt me and it will essentially correct it for me. So let's hit enter and see what we get. Now, you might be thinking, well, that doesn't look much like a tick, and you would be correct. Let's copy it down. So I'm going to double click to copy that down. And we have some very strange things in here. Now, remember, this is essentially, or wingdings are essentially a font. So if I go to the home ribbon, you'll see that I have Calibri font applied to this range. And what I actually want is just to switch that to wingdings, which is what the symbols were originally located in. So if I switch it to wingdings, I then get my symbols. So that's a really nice way of being able to convert symbols into numerical values and then apply them in there. So I could then replace those. I could hide the page column and just have the symbols if I wanted to. Now, how can I use conditional formatting along with this? Well, I can then go in and I can then use conditional formatting to highlight maybe all of the invoices that have been paid, for example. So I'm going to highlight my column. As I said, I always like to highlight the entire column. I'm going to go to the home ribbon and down to conditional formatting. And I'm going to go to new rule. And again, I'm going to go back into my old, actually, no, we're going to go to format only cells that contain. So I'm going to say format the cells that contain, and we're going to say equal to, and for this first one, we're going to do char 80, which is essentially that tick, okay? And I'm going to say format And we're going to highlight in, let's do a yellow color, and click on OK. And there we go. So again, a very easy way to utilize an if statement and also conditional formatting in your spreadsheets. And if you wanted to, you could then delete all of that. You just have it looking nice and neat. So very quickly, you've got a really nice visual representation as opposed to text. So that's a way which I hadn't seen it used that way before. So I thought it might be quite interesting for you guys to take a look at that as well. Now, something else we're going to do on this spreadsheet is another way that you can use conditional formatting. And I really like this as kind of like a status indicator. And again, you might be able to think of ways that you can use this in your daily work. So imagine that you have some kind of large spreadsheet of data. So in this example, we have a monthly target. So let's just pretend this is my invoice and there's a certain amount of money that I need to make each month. So I want to be able to see very quickly at a glance if I've made my target, or if I'm at my target, or if I'm below my target. And I'm going to use conditional formatting to work that out for me. So what I might do here is in column D, we have the amount for each of the events that I'm running. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a total at the bottom here. Let me just delete that out. So I'm just going to do a very quick sum calculation, and I'm just going to highlight everything above and close my bracket. And I can see that the total for the month, lucky me, $16,350. I wish that was my total for the month. That would be lovely. I could retire to the sunshine, but unfortunately it's not. But let's just imagine that that is our total for the month, and maybe my target each month is 16,000. So I want to be able to see at the top of the spreadsheet by way of an indicator that I have reached my target, or if I am below my target. So the first thing I want to do is I want to link this cell here to my total, so that every time this total changes, I can see my new status up here. Now, when it comes to linking cells, people tend to think that's quite difficult, but it's actually not. All you need to do is go into here, select equals, and then just select the cell you want to link to. So this cell, hit enter. What you'll see is whatever is in the cell that you've linked to, so in this case D27, will appear in this cell up here. If this number changes, it will also change up here because I've essentially linked those two cells together. So what I'm going to do now is, instead of having the number up here, I could leave it like that if I wanted to. I just want a very clear visual indicator, and I'm going to use a traffic light system for this. So I want to say if I've met my target, I want it to show green. If I'm slightly below target, I want it to show yellow. And if I'm way under target, I want it to show red. So I'm going to use a different type of conditional formatting. I'm going to go up to conditional formatting. And this time I'm going to use one of these graphical representations. So I'm going to use an icon set. And you can see we have lots of different ones in here. I'm going to use this little traffic light system. So I'm going to select 3 traffic lights. And it's automatically put in a little green traffic light because my target, well, I haven't set my target yet. So I'm going to go into Manage Rules, and I'm going to edit my icon set because I want to define what my target is. So at the bottom here, I have my icons which can be displayed. So green, yellow, and red. And currently these values aren't correct. Now I have a number in this cell, so I want to make sure first of all that the type is number in both of these. And what I'm going to say is when the value is greater than or equal to 16,000, which is my target every month, I want you to show a green indicator. I'm then going to say if it's between 14,000, so if I'm slightly under target, I want you to show a yellow icon. And then anything below 14,000, it's going to show red. And then click on OK. And OK again. So it's showing me green, which is fine. Now let's take a look at how that will change, because I've made this dynamic. So if there are any changes to this linked cell, the total, then this is going to update dynamically. So let's take a look at that in action. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a filter to these headers. So let's go to Data and Filter. And I'm going to filter for all of the sessions that have been cancelled. And I can see there I have 2. So I'm going to get rid of these off of my invoice. So I'm going to highlight both of these. I'm going to right click and I'm going to select Delete Row. I'm now going to clear my filter to bring all my data back. And if we look, the total at the bottom has changed because I've removed those 2. And you can see my indicator has updated. So it's now showing me that I'm slightly below my target of 16,000. What I could do to make this even neater is I don't necessarily have to have 15,300 in there. I don't have to have the figure. I could just have the visual indicator. So again, if I go back into my piece of conditional formatting, so if we go to Manage Rules and edit the rule, there's a nice little option in here that says Show Icon Only, and click on OK. And it just shows me that indicator. So I could have that at the top of my spreadsheet, and very quickly I can see just by looking at it if I'm under target, if I need to book some more sessions, or if I'm above target and I can basically chill out for the rest of the month. So it's a really nice way of just being able to indicate very quickly where you're up to on your spreadsheet. It's a good way of tracking progress, and you might be able to think in your mind of examples that you have where something like that might be quite useful. Okay, so that's another way that you can do it. I'm just going to check in with you guys. As I said again, I'm not taking questions right now, but is everybody all right? How are we going? Are we learning anything so far? Have we learned anything yet? Always like to check. Yeah, okay, good. Just take a little sip of my coffee. Wonderful. Ah, yes, sweet, someone says. I know, there's so many cool little things you can do with conditional formatting. It's really quite endless. All right, shall we move on? Next example. Now, I'm hoping I don't get this one confused. I was doing this earlier and I was doing everything back to front, but so I'm hoping it's going to work out. I still struggle sometimes with Excel. Don't think that you're the only ones. I still do, and I've been doing this for a very long time. Oh dear, right. We've got a different kind of spreadsheet here. We have some products. We have some prices for those products. We have the number of units that have been sold, and then we have the profit. And you can see in the profit, if you look in the formula bar, the profit is essentially made up of a very simple calculation. We have the B4, so the price, multiplied by the number of units, and that gives us the profit for each of these products. Now, what I want to do here is, again, I want to be able to enter a value in here, which we currently have 0, and see by ways of conditional formatting which ones are essentially equal to or above that. So if I enter in 5,000, I want to see all of the products where I've made more than 5,000 profit. Excuse me. Now, the way that we have to do this, again, is using a logical function. So this might seem a little bit strange, but stick with me as we go through. And as I said, I did get this back to front earlier on when I was doing it. So what I'm going to do is in this cell here, and I've just highlighted these just so they stand out from the rest of the spreadsheet, I'm going to type a little formula in here. And what I'm going to say is equals, I'm going to say if D4 is greater than or equal to whatever is in here, F4, which is currently 0, okay? Now, I'm going to copy this down, but I always want to refer to cell F4. I don't want it to move down, so I need to make F4 absolute. And we do that by pressing F4 to get those dollar signs in there. So that's very basic. If D4 is greater than or equal to whatever is in F4, currently 0. Let's hit enter. I get the result of true. I would expect that. And if I copy down like so. I'm going to get true in all of those. And because I've copied down, you'll see when I go to the next cell, it's now saying, the formula is now saying if D5 is greater than or equal to F4, and that's true as well. So all of these are going to be true because all of these numbers are currently above 0. This is the cell it's referring to. Okay, now what I want to be able to do is to come into here and enter in various different values and have this show with conditional formatting if that's true or false. And I like to put this in here because I think it sort of shows you really nicely how these reflect in the conditional formatting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight my profits. I'm going to go up to conditional formatting. I'm going to go to new rule. Actually, before I do that, I want to copy and paste. I want to copy this formula in here. So let me just copy this. Sorry, I just need to backtrack very slightly. We're going to use that in here. So conditional formatting, new rule. And we've already been in here a couple of times. So I'm going to say, use a formula. And I'm just going to paste this formula in. Okay, so now we have D4 is greater than or equal to F4. And I'm going to set a format. And let's just do an orange color. And click on OK. Now, as you would expect, currently everything is highlighted because everything is greater than 0. So now if I go into here and if I say 5,000 and hit enter, you'll see that that updates. And now it's only showing me those values that are greater than or equal to 5,000. And you'll also see that this has changed over here. So now it's saying, OK, that's true, that's true, that's false, that's false. So that's kind of how it works out what to put in here. And again, I could say 6,000 and you'll see that, or I could go even lower, 4,000. And it will update. So that's a nice way of sort of dynamically being able to use conditional formatting in a spreadsheet. And again, you might be able to think of specific examples that you use where that might be quite useful. And again, you could hide this column if you wanted to. All right, moving along swiftly. Let's go to, actually, before we move on to the last example, I'm just going to jump you back to the album list column because there is a couple of other conditional formats that we haven't looked at that I think are worth highlighting. So I'm going to highlight my column. I'm going to go to conditional formatting. Now, we've got things like data bars, color scales. I've already shown you those icon sets, but you do have other ways of visually representing the data in your cells. So again, data bars is a really nice way of just being able to show or visually represent the data that's in each cell. And again, essentially what Excel does is it looks at the numbers and then it sort of shows a visual representation. And these bars are all in relation to each other, depending on what the value is. Now, this can sometimes look a little bit busy. Again, remember you have, when you've got conditional formatting, if you go into manage rules, I can manage this rule, and I could say show bar only. And that will just give me that visual representation. So that's quite nice if you don't want to show the figures, but you want to give people sort of a general idea of what's going on. It's useful in industries like HR. So maybe if they're doing a presentation where they're showing people's salaries, they don't necessarily want to show the entire team everybody's salaries, but they want to give them an indication. You could use something like that. So remember that you can remove the data and just show the bar only. So that's a nice thing that you can use. And I will say you can use these on any data. So I use these quite often when I'm doing things like pivot charts. They look really good in pivot charts, just another way of analyzing your data. Now I'm just going to go back in. I'm going to manage that rule. And I'm just going to delete that rule, like so. Because another thing that you can use, which is quite nice, another visual way of representing data is by using color scales, or a heat map, you might call them. And there's a few different options that you have in here, and it all depends which one you want to use. So if I use this one, if I hover over it, you can see there it's going to give you a gradient scale. So it's going to apply a color gradient to a range of cells, and the color indicates where each cell value falls within that range. Now, because this one is called red to yellow to green, it means that the highest values are going to show in red, and then it kind of grades them down towards the lowest value, which you'll find in green. So that's, again, quite a nice way of being able to see visually what the higher values are and what the lower values are. It can look really good in certain spreadsheets just to be able to apply that. All right, so don't forget about these more visual ways of representing your data. And of course, you can combine these with other conditional formats as well. So I just wanted to highlight both of those before we moved on. All right, so final example here. And this is related to duplicates and also highlighting data in tables. So there is in the conditional formatting, there is a duplicates option. If you go to highlight cells rules, you see you have a duplicate values option just here. Now, this tends to confuse people a little bit, and I don't find it the most helpful. It can be quite helpful sometimes. I find it most helpful when I'm applying it to just one column, but not that helpful, and I'll show you what I mean. If I was to highlight the states column, so again here, this table is just order numbers, the date of the order, the amount, the name, and the state. If I was to go to highlight cells rules and say duplicate values, it's going to highlight everything because I've got multiple NYs, I've got multiple of everything in here. So it's saying, well, all of these are duplicates. Now, that might be useful in some scenarios, but what I found is when people want to use this, they maybe want to highlight the entire row. So for example, I might want to highlight all of the rows where I am listed. So I might want it to do something along those lines where it's just highlighting everything where my name is, but the entire row. Now, you can't do that with that duplicate values option. You can't highlight everything, go to duplicate values. It doesn't work, okay? You need to do something a little bit different. So let me show you how this works. I'm going to highlight all of my data except the header rows. I'm going to go up to conditional formatting, and I'm going to go down to new rule, and I'm going to say use a formula again. And what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to say equals, and I'm going to select my name. So I want it to highlight all the rows where it sees my name. So I'm going to say E4. Now again, it's made that absolute, and in this case, I want it to be able to go down, sorry, I want it to be able to go across, but not down. So I'm going to remove the absolute off of the row. I only want to lock it on the column because it's going to be looking in column E for my name, but I want it to be able to highlight all of the rows. So we have $E4, and we're going to say when it's equal, and then I'm just going to put my name in quote marks. Okay, so it's going to look in E4 where it finds my name. It's then going to highlight in green and click on OK. And there we go. I could do another rule if I wanted to. So I could go back to conditional formatting. Let's do it again. Use formula. I could do the same thing. So I could say equals. I'm just going to type this in. So dollar, we're doing E4, aren't we? So E4. When that equals Adam Lacey, I want it to highlight in, let's do yellow. Okay, okay again. So you can use conditional formatting to highlight those individual rows as well. All right, so that's another way that you can use it. Now, quickly, something which isn't really conditional formatting, but I always think this is quite nice, and I do get quite a lot of questions about this as well, and it is related to filtering, which we've done a little bit of in this session today. So I just want to show you how to pull out unique values, because this is actually, if we go into highlight cells rules and duplicate values, you see here you also have an option to pull out unique values. Now, I'm going to do this a slightly different way. what I want to do is just pull out a list of all of the names, but you can see here the names are repeated. So you've got me listed in there 3 times, and basically these people are just listed over and over again. Now what I want to do is pull out a list of just those 5 or 6 names and put them in here. Okay, so I can do that using a unique values option, and it is a filter and it's under the advanced filter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to data. I'm going to go to this sort and filter area and select advanced. And I get this little panel pop up. And what I'm going to say is I want to copy it to another location. And it's saying, what is your list range? So my list range that I want to use is this list range just here. So all of the names. I want to copy it to, and I'm going to say, this cell just here, and I want unique records only, and click on OK. And there you go, it gives me all of those names. In fact, it's highlighted me twice. Not quite sure why I've done that. It might have been my selection that I made, but it will give you a unique list of names. I've obviously highlighted something I shouldn't have in there, but that's a nice way of being able to get a unique list of values in there out of a long list of names. So that could be quite useful as well for you. So I just wanted to throw that one in right at the end. All right, guys, this session always goes so quickly. We've got literally 5 minutes left, so I'm going to open it up for some questions. So if you do have a question, if you want to type it into the question box, I will say try not to make them too long. Some people give me really, really long questions, which are quite hard to answer on the call, but let me have a look, see what we've got. So Andrew says, hello Deb, if you use the 10 or 15% conditional format command to highlight a sales column and then add sales data later, do you have to refresh, or will Excel refresh automatically to add the newly added data? That's Andrew, that's why I highlight the entire column. If you highlight the column and then apply the conditional formatting, any records that you add will automatically have the conditional formatting applied. So that is why I say highlight the entire column, because then everything that you add will also have the conditional formatting applied. You don't need to refresh or do anything. Lovely. Robin's put, I'm wondering if you could possibly show how to apply my formula to a whole column. I am using higher, lower, or equals to arrows to show a change between 2 columns. I wonder if you possibly show how to apply a formula to a whole column. I'm not entirely sure what you mean. With the higher, lower, or equal to arrows, I'm assuming that you mean the icon sets, which have higher, lower, and equal to. With the icon sets, if I just jump back to album list, and let's just clear this formatting. So I'm just going to say clear rules. Now, when you say you've got, I'm assuming you've got these in here, these directional arrows. With conditional formatting, it will automatically work out. Obviously, you can set these to whatever you want. So the way these are applied, Excel looks at your data and then kind of divides it into 3. Because I have 3 different kinds of arrows here, it looks at the data, it divides it into 3 and then kind of groups them according to which third they fall into. Now you can always change, if you go to manage rules, you can change what those values are in here. So again, I've got numbers in here. So I might want to define what each of those arrows mean and set my own specific values. And that is how you can define the formulas behind these arrows to show changes in data. Hopefully that answers your question. Let's jump back to questions. Let's have a look. Can you use conditional formatting in the invoice example to highlight the invoice number depending on which symbol is in column F? Yes, you could do that. Let me just think. So to highlight, let's go back to the invoice. This one here. So you're saying, can you use conditional formatting to highlight the invoice number? So this here. Depending upon which symbol in column F. Yes, you could. So you could use conditional formatting for that, and it would be an if statement, and you would have to use that char. So very similar to what we did in here. You could use the same thing using those character numbers as well. So you could use that on that invoice column also. Dee, are you going to add contact info for yourself? Any questions to the email that we sent out with the recording? So my email, for those of you wondering sort of what happens going forward. So I'm going to give you my email at the end of this session, which I would advise you to make a note of. I'm also going to give you my LinkedIn contact details if you want to connect with me. I don't send out my personal contact information with the recording because that's a bit weird, because I'm doing these on behalf of another company. They probably wouldn't appreciate that too much. So, but I will give you my contact information at the end of the session, yes. Alfred's put, I hope I can reach my email when I have some challenges in Excel. Alfred, I'm going to give you my email address at the end. Someone's put, will past tutorials still be available on YouTube? Yes, they will. Someone's put, is this going to be the last class? Unfortunately, yes, at the moment, at least for the 3 companies that I run these for. I might choose to do something else in the future. That's why I'm encouraging you to stay connected with me for any other updates that I add. Aidan, can you use conditional formatting to change text of a cell based on text value of another cell? Aidan, you can use conditional formatting for pretty much anything. Because you have the option to use formulas, you can go to town. So anything you can do in a formula, you can do with conditional formatting. As I said, I don't have time to go through every single option that we have here, but you definitely can. I would Google that one, but it's going to be, again, using, and a lot of the more complex things you want to do are going to be using this, use a formula, because you can pretty much use any formula and apply conditional formatting. So yes, the world is your oyster. Let's have a look. Ulf has put, thanks Deb for many professional webinars. Thank you. Lots of tips and tricks and many useful examples. Wish you all the best. Oh, thank you, Ulf. That's very nice of you to say. Brad's put, I am new to these webinars. I'm wondering why the data is not formatted in tables, and if this would change how the rules need to be entered. Yep, I haven't in this example got them in tables, but I could put them in tables. It would change it for some things, simply because when you have your data in tables, Excel treats the table slightly different, particularly when you're using formulas. So if this data was in a table, so if I'd formatted it as a table, if I was doing conditional formatting where I need to use a formula, if I'm referring to anything that's within the table, the formula that comes up will be slightly different because it references the table columns as opposed to the cell ranges. So that's the reason why I haven't put these in tables, is just to make it as simple as possible. I don't want to start confusing people who didn't attend the tables webinar that we ran last week with lots of sort of weird things in the formulas. So that's why I've kept them out of tables for this session. But yes, essentially, you could do exactly the same thing. It would just be referenced slightly differently because that's what Excel does when your data's in a table. Let's look. Can you use the format painter to duplicate conditional formatting in one or other cells in a table? That's a really great question, actually, and one I haven't tried. Let's give it a go. Let me click here, conditional formatting. No, it doesn't apply. I guess because we've got a formula underlying here, so it needs to meet these conditions in order to apply it. You might be able to apply it on some of the others. Let's give it a go. Format painter, no, because again, this is a condition, so we're looking for beetles, so I can't then just apply this condition to here. Actually, if I do, I'm just thinking if I could do a copy and paste conditional formatting, you might be able to do that. If I do copy, go down to Nirvana, and I think in paste options, or underneath paste special, you have, unless I'm going crazy, I thought you had a conditional formatting option in here. Let's see, formulas, values, formats. Let's try that one. Let's just see what that does. Yeah, it changes it to beetles, so no. I'm sure there was a conditional formatting option in there, but maybe I'm wrong. Doesn't look so. Let's have a look. Who shall we contact to request these seminars to continue? Yeah, Richard, if you want to organise a revolt, I am more than happy for you to do that. If you contact our customer service email, if you want to say how much you enjoy them, then if enough people contact them, then you maybe they might decide to reinstate them. You never know. So yes, if you do want to contact them, you can send an email through, and I'll just type this into the chat panel for those of you that do want to organise a revolt. If you do info at webinars theme, I'm just going to type this into chat, .com. That is the email address, so that will go through to our customer service team, which then gets forwarded to our sales team, who are the ones who hire me for these sessions. So yeah, if you fancy sending them, then don't tell them I told you to do that though. Let me have a look. Nancy, I'll just do a couple more because we are over time now. Nancy, but I have a large spreadsheet I'd like to pick your brain about. It's a monthly sales report. Could you send me your contact info? I'm going to give you my contact info in just a moment. Let's have a look. Wes, so the apply to formatting must be different for data connected to a table or refreshing pivot tables. No, again, if you apply the conditional formatting to a pivot table, it depends. If you have a pivot table, and again, if you're not familiar with pivot tables, this might not make much sense, but if you have a pivot table and you've applied, say, conditional formatting to it, so maybe something like these icon sets, and then you update the data, you will need to refresh the pivot table to get it to update. Yes, so it does work slightly different. All right, we are 5 minutes over. I know there's more questions, but I'm going to stop it there. Let me just pull up my contact details as everybody is asking for them. So I'll just put those up. Oh, did I put my contact details? Possibly did on the next screen. So I just want to let you know that those of you that have or have purchased courses, those are still available. They're still being updated, so don't worry about your courses at all. And I just really want to say it's been such a pleasure over the last 3 years to train you guys every single week. I know we have some people who have come every week, and it's just been an absolute joy. And the messages that some of you send through about these webinars has just been really touching. They do all get forwarded on to me, and it's just really, really nice to read that everybody appreciates the session. It's really the whole reason that I do this job, is to just help you guys and help you build your Excel skills. But I don't know if you can hear that police siren in the background. I'm really sorry about that. It's very loud. All right, so if you want to stay in contact with me, as I said, and I've put my email address in wrong. Oh my God, this is my new email address and I'm still not used to it. Let me just add that in. Here we go. Let me put that back up. Okay, so that is my email address. So trainitnowlimited@gmail.com. So if you want to contact me directly, you can. It's also worth connecting with me on LinkedIn. That is what I look like on LinkedIn, very bright and colourful. That is the side of our office building that I'm standing in front of. And yeah, if you connect with me on there, any updates for stuff that I'm doing in the future, you will see on there. So there might be a point where I decide to put these webinars on outside of the other companies. Obviously the issue that I have here, and I hate to break it down to this, but obviously the issue is that I get paid to do these by the companies that I work for, and if I'm doing them by myself, it would mean that that would have to be made up by you guys, and I absolutely hate charging people for webinars. So unfortunately I don't have the bandwidth to do them for free, but you never know. So keep in contact with me. There might be a way that we can work it out in the future. Or if you have any feedback on that, if you guys would be willing to pay like a donation or something like that, I'm open to ideas. I would very much like to continue training you every single week. But obviously I need to eat as well. So if you have any ideas or any thoughts on that, then feel free to email them through to me. Lovely. All right, guys, I'm going to leave it there. Somebody's saying they don't see the EWB contact address. I did put it in the chat panel. Let me just put it up here. I think that's probably a bit easier for some of you to see. So if you want to email them, info at webinarsteam.com. Let me move that up very slightly. There we go. So that is the email address, which will go through to EWB customer service. If you want to make any comments or request that these webinars continue, you never know, they might listen to you. And he's going to send Deb pizza for training. You know what, Andrew, pizza is my most favorite food in the world, so that would be very much appreciated. Right, guys, I'm going to stop waffling on because I'm sure you all have better things to do than listen to me talk. So, as I said again, it's been an absolute pleasure. And if I don't speak to you again, then good luck with everything you do in the future. Please connect with me, send your emails, and you never know, we might be back together again very soon. But if not, thank you guys for 3 years of wonderfulness. And I will hopefully see you somewhere down the track. Okay, guys, bye.